Well, welcome to the 700 Club. The word is out. The Chinese and the Russians have gotten together to agree on a massive disinformation campaign to blame the United States for the coronavirus pandemic. And they're opening up all over the world to bring shame to the United States if they're successful. That is what we're facing. And the question is, what is the United States going to do to answer? We had Senator Cotton on the other day who talked about how terrible the Chinese were, but he stopped short of war. And now we understand that there's a move in the Senate to increase the military forces we have in the Far East. Well, opening gyms, bowling alleys, and barbershops. This week, that's the plan of Georgia's governor, despite no 2-week decline in coronavirus cases. Lindsey Graham says it's going to spill over to South Carolina out of Georgia. Well, 19 other states are also preparing to reopen in the near future. The big question, is it too soon? And what I've got to ask you is, would you want to go to a theater and sit next to a stranger? Would you want to go to a restaurant and sit right next to 4 or 5 people who are in the restaurant? Well, maybe yes, maybe no, but the question is, will we reopen for sure? And now Congress is saying we're going to spend billions more dollars with another round of relief in the race against time to save small businesses. But are huge companies like Harvard University and Shake Shack going to get the millions? Or the poor little guys, are they going to get it? Caitlin Burke has that report.
With this latest coronavirus stimulus package, lawmakers are hopeful the $484 billion bill will be enough to keep small businesses going. But Republican leaders say it's just a stopgap.
Unless we get our economy up and running again, there's not any way we can spend enough to continue to prop up the country.
$383 billion of this latest stimulus bill will be earmarked specifically for small business programs, including the Paycheck Protection Program.
We want to make sure this money is available to small businesses that need it, people who have invested their entire life savings.
The new legislation is on its way to the House after being passed Tuesday by the Senate. Meanwhile, much of the country is working to reopen.
20 states representing 40% of the U.S. population have announced that they are making plans and preparations to safely restart their economies in the very near future.
Still, some of the states rushing to reopen don't meet the White House guidelines. Georgia's governor is preparing to open gyms, bowling alleys, and barbershops this week, despite not seeing a 2-week decline in COVID-19 cases.
When we have more people moving around, we're probably going to see our cases continue to go up, but we're a lot better prepared for that now than we were over a month ago.
I certainly cannot in good conscience say that I agree with his order, and I will continue to use my voice as mayor of Atlanta to ask people to continue to stay home, follow the science, and exercise common sense.
CDC Director Robert Redfield warned that a second wave of COVID-19 could coincide with the start of flu season and prove to be even more devastating than what we now face. Dr. Deborah Birx says if there is another wave, the country will be much better prepared.
We're going to continue that surveillance from now all the way through the fall to be able to give us that early warning signal. I think what we've learned is how good Americans are about immediately reverting to all of those issues that they need to do in order to ensure that they're protected and their families.
Meanwhile, the FDA says it's granted emergency clearance for a new in-home test for COVID-19. And in the United Kingdom, researchers at Oxford University are beginning human trials on a potential vaccine. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Thanks, Caitlin. In other news, as I mentioned before, Russia, China, and Iran all are working together in a global disinformation campaign to sow distrust about the United States government, blaming it for the COVID-19 crisis. John Jessup has more on this shocking story from our CBN News Bureau.
Pat, and as you were talking about at the top of the show, a new report from the State Department shows the three nations are carrying out a coordinated effort sowing false narratives related to the coronavirus outbreak. Russia, China, and Iran are using state media, social media, and government agencies to plant fake stories. Each nation then repeating the other's claims in their own media to reinforce and then spread the stories. One claims the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation created COVID-19 with pharmaceutical companies to profit from the treatment. Another says the U.S. government created the virus as a bioweapon. The report says one of the aims of the campaign is to distract citizens in those nations from their own leaders' poor response to the virus. Well, oil prices dropped again in overnight trading, with the United States benchmark West Texas Intermediate falling as low as $10.26 at one point. That came after oil prices closed Tuesday at their lowest levels since February of 1999. But things may be looking a little brighter on Wall Street today, where stock futures were up this morning after the Dow fell 1,300 points Monday and Tuesday. That pullback came after a huge rally, took the Dow up 6,000 points, around 33%, Pat, in just a month.
What we don't know is there going to be a V-shaped recovery or a U-shaped recovery. And we were hoping that there would be a V-shape that would hit the bottom and go up very rapidly, and that's what the stock market did the first day or two. But then it just dropped off sharply yesterday, and we don't know what happened. And then the next day, in the next few hours, it comes back again. But this oil thing is a crisis, and it's not a question of what's happening now, it's what down the road, because the guys won't be drilling, and the crews that work on those oil rigs will be laid off, and then getting those oil fields back pumping and working again may take a while. The United States has led the world in oil. That's the oil export has saved our economy, and now the prices are down below anything that's been seen in decades. And there's a crash. We had reports yesterday or the day before that oil had gone into a negative territory, so people were having to pay somebody to take their crude. Now they're going to get paid a little bit of money for it, but it's just way, way below the cost of production. They were figuring it would take at least $50, $60 a barrel oil to break even, and now we're looking at maybe $10 for West Texas intermediate crude, which is the benchmark we have, and even Brent, which is the international standard for oil, has gone down. So what's going to happen to that industry? But that's just one of many. The food industry is in trouble. All across the board, this thing has hit very hard. And to blame the United States for this disaster, we're asking for terrorists to come to America to do damage because we're being blamed for a thing that is destroying the economy of the world. John.
Pat, before the coronavirus pandemic, the world was becoming more and more interconnected, and globalization was the buzzword. Now, strong borders appear to be making a comeback, and as Dale Hurd reports, some predict the change could be permanent.
The map on the left was air travel in Europe 1 year ago. On the right, air travel now. In the span of just a few months, international travel has been set back more than 100 years. And except for meeting people online, our once interconnected world has largely been disconnected. Could coronavirus kill globalization as we know it? The pandemic has brought back nationalism and borders and could have a long-term impact on the way the world is organized.
If we've learned one thing, it's let's do it here, let's build it here, let's make it here. We've got the greatest country in the world. We've got to start bringing our supply chains back.
President Trump wants to make America more self-reliant. When coronavirus was raging, some nations got burned when they couldn't get the emergency supplies they needed. European Union nations closed their borders with each other like enemies, and in some cases denied help to each other.
We are on the verge of a great awakening in terms of what is at stake.
Dr. William Maloney of the Centennial Institute believes many eyes have been opened to the dangers of unchecked globalization, which he claims was never the path to global prosperity that it was supposed to be.
What happened is that most of the savings from exploiting cheap labor, mostly in Asia, went to corporate headquarters. And the real result was the hollowing out and outright collapse of a wide swath of American manufacturing.
Trade expert Simon Lester thinks globalization was mostly good and will return, but in another form.
I think that we will return to the same level of interconnectedness, but we might be connecting in different ways.
Lester also believes the Chinese government faces a reckoning, possibly in the form of economic isolation by some countries, for spreading a deadly virus through lies and cover-ups.
Yeah, I think there's going to be an investigation into what happened, and China's going to get a lot of the blame, and there's going to be some degree of economic decoupling.
Experts expect more Americans to flee major cities, some of which became dangerous killing zones when the pandemic was raging. And travel industry analyst Henry Hardevelt says the airlines may not be healthy again for a very long time.
You'll see fewer airplanes flying than you did before. You may have fewer airlines operating than before.
Experts say one worst-case scenario is if for some reason coronavirus never completely goes away. And then experts say it will really be a whole new world, and perhaps not a very nice one. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Thanks, Dale. Back here in America, it looks like most schools will remain closed into late summer and fall. Schools are in phase 2 of the president's guidelines for reopening the country, but the guidelines also bar gatherings of 50 people or more, and that's a difficult goal for classrooms and crowded hallways. Officials in at least 37 states have ordered or recommended schools stay closed through the end of the school year, affecting more than 55 million students in at least 124,000 private and public schools. While some districts in rural states hope to reopen in May, other states that have been hotspots, Pat, may not reopen even in the fall.
You know, we talk about the damage. Part of the damage is being done to private colleges. Many of the smaller independent colleges are going bankrupt. They can't survive without any students. The students aren't coming. And in those cases, many of the professors are unable to teach online. They just aren't equipped to do it. And so they can't give the courses, and they don't have the students. And we're looking at a disaster. Again, one phase of the economy is being hurt. I'm pleased to report that Regent University has been the leader. It put out the first online doctorate in the history of America, doctorate in organizational leadership. And that school, because of its pioneering, is doing extremely well, having many students. And we have, it's going to be a virtual graduation where everything is going to be done electronically, but it'll look as if we're all there giving degrees to people. It'll be all the usual stuff.
And you just did that, right? You got.
I did it for the individual schools. We used to have commissioning ceremonies, and I did that all virtually. We had the vid wall behind me. It looked like the chapel,
and you had your gown on and your cap.
Everything.
What did that? What was that like?
Well, it was fun. It was, you know, each time I said, and now the School of Education, I congratulate the graduates. In the School of Business, I congratulate, you know, and each one of these things is going to be put together. And
wow.
When it's all finished, the graduates will feel like something special. But the actual graduation, again, is going to be online. It's going to be taped, but it'll be a wonderful production. And having this video that we see behind us, this vid wall, enables us to go everywhere in the world. And so Regent University was ahead of the game, but frankly, folks, when you look at each part of the economy, the airlines, the oil industry, the stock market, the food chain, the restaurants, all the things that make up this great land that we're in, they're all being hurt. And education is just one more phase of it. But boy, if there's ever a time that we need to pray for this nation and pray for God's mercy, it's right now. John?
Pat, and speaking of graduates and education, thanks to COVID-19, more than 3 million high school seniors will likely miss their end-of-year celebrations, meaning no proms or graduation ceremonies. CBN senior correspondent Eric Phillips explains why missing out on these traditions can be painful.
Some things like high school graduation and prom are seen as rites of passage and accomplishment. Sadly, many of those in the class of 2020 will be stripped of that through no fault of their own.
I love school, and I miss it like so much. I miss seeing my friends.
18-year-old Kenya Morris was all smiles on day one of her senior year at Caroline High School in Virginia. Little did she or anyone else know an international crisis would cut it short. She was blindsided by the news in March.
Of course, I was crying for like at least 2 hours because in the back of my head, I was kind of just like hoping that this isn't true, that this is going to go away. It's going to be fine. I'm still going to have a prom. I'm still going to have my graduation. It'll go away by April. It's going to be fine. But then they went, okay, school's canceled for the rest of the year. No prom, no graduation. Sorry. And though this is something that's completely out of our control, it was still like, dang it.
It's bittersweet as she and her family look at her senior portrait and pictures of her trying on her prom dress. Even the cap and gown that arrived in the mail.
I wanted my prom to celebrate that, hey, this is my last year here. You've been working so hard for like a little over a decade trying to get to this point, and all of a sudden it's just taken from you.
Through testing, school officials determined Kenya was developmentally delayed when she was 4 or 5 years old. Yet, by the 7th grade, she had worked through it, going on to thrive academically, and even becoming president of her high school's National Honor Society chapter.
I wanted my graduation to be like, I did it. I did it. Look at this. I did it. I've proven to myself and others I can do it. So can you.
I hate seeing their disappointment. That's hard as a mom, as a parent. That's really hard for me.
It's disappointing on all sides.
My oldest was homeschooled, and so I didn't get to see her walk across the stage. So Kenya was going to be our first one to walk across the stage, get the diploma, and I was so excited.
According to Caroline High's website, school officials hope to reschedule both events before the fall.
It's a very limited amount of time to get in a prom and a graduation. I hope they can do it. I do.
I didn't work this hard for nothing.
Though the current situation is disappointing, Kenya is still determined. She plans to attend Virginia Commonwealth University in the fall to study neonatal nursing. Eric Phillips, CBN News.
Thanks, Eric. Pat, so many kids missing out on these enduring rites of passage.
Well, it's one of those things, but it's better than starving to death. It's better than dying of a virus. So the thing is, they've got food on the table, and they've got a family, and they're still healthy. They may not be able to have a graduation where they walk across the stage and get a diploma, but and they can't go to a prom. Or if that's the worst of their worries, that's tough luck. But you know,
I believe God will pay it back somehow. You know,
You're right.
He always does. What the enemy means for evil, God means for good, and somehow they're going to be a blessed generation.
I think so. They'll learn strength. They get strength out of this. I mean, it's not you lose something, but the Lord gives you something back that's even better.